All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today on Friday, the 25th of October. Thank you very much for taking the time for attending. My name is Kai Buraval. I'm a Director of Support and Training here at Enscape. I hope everybody hears me well. If that's not the case, please type a short message in the chat. In the next hour, over the course of the next hour, we will talk about Enscape for ArchiCAD. So if you've got any questions, if I'm talking too fast, or if you don't understand me, or if you want me to cover a topic in a little more detail, feel free to type it in the chat or type in a question. You should see a question field somewhere in the GoToWebinar meeting interface. If you want to talk to the audience, you can also raise your hand and I'll know that I'm supposed to unmute you. But feel free to ask a question anytime and I'll be happy to answer it right away, especially since there's not too many viewers today in the audience. So I will by default hold this webinar as a default webinar for Enscape newcomers, so a general introduction. If you are familiar with Enscape, however, feel free to let me know and I'll be happy to adjust it depending on your wishes. So again, whatever you're interested in, feel free to ask any questions during my webinar and I'll be happy to tweak it during the presentation. All right, we'll also hold a Q&A during the last 15 minutes. So over the next 45 minutes, we will have a look at, if nobody requests otherwise, navigation in Enscape, how it communicates with ArchiCAD, then the export functionalities, so how to create a rendering, how to create a panorama, how to create a video and an exe standalone export, and also how to achieve great materials, of course, using the newly released material editor for ArchiCAD by Enscape. Apart from that, I hope we will find the time to have a look at our assets and how to use them properly to create nice renderings. And also just a information for you, you don't have to take notes. This webinar is being recorded. You will all receive a email sometime tomorrow containing the recording of this webinar, so you can watch it again whenever you want to. Oh yeah, by the way, you probably see about 1 or 2 frames per second here. I'm aware of that. That is, of course, due to the service we're using here. And Enscape, of course, if you haven't tried it yet, runs fluently for me and should do the same for you. Also, if you're new to Enscape, if you haven't tried it yet, be aware that there is a trial, a free trial available on our website, enscape3d.com. Simply, where's my marker? There it is. Simply click the free trial button up here and you can apply for 14 days of trial for free. And by the way, if you want to discuss any topic in further detail, or if that topic is not being covered during my webinar, you can also request a free personal demo down here by clicking this button here. And that way you can schedule a one-on-one meeting with me or with one of my colleagues to ask any questions. These are free as well, so feel free to make use of that in case not all of your questions are being covered during our webinar today. All right, I think that's enough disclaimers to start with. Why is the cable, the wire to my keyboard that short right now? I'm not sure. Check it later. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Maybe a brief description. What is Enscape about? What problem does it mean to solve? Enscape is a real-time rendering engine. So in case in the audience nobody has ever rendered anything yet, well, let's say architects or designers always had a hard time to communicate their design ideas. You know, architects used to build maquettes or draw to tell their client what they're supposed to build. Then came 3D softwares, which were used for film and high class productions. and it became reasonable to transfer a architectural or a design model into a professional 3D software. But it took a lot of know-how. It took a lot of time, so a lot of people at the same time, and yeah, architecture studios used to outsource that to other companies, and it used to take weeks and weeks to convert the whole CAD model into 3D CGI data. But then with the continuing improvement of gaming technology, it became more and more possible to create beautiful or even photorealistic visualizations that you could not just watch an image of, which would take, you know, maybe an hour to render or something like that, but which were essentially created 60 times a second. And that's where Enscape came into place. Enscape is the real-time rendering engine that communicates directly to your professional CAD data. That means you do not have to know about CGI, you do not have to learn a new software, you just click one button, and here's our Enscape interface that comes into play. You should see this in your ArchiCAD interface after running the Enscape installer, which you can get, for example, by applying for the Enscape trial. So professionals only have to press one single button, namely this one, the start button, and Enscape essentially does all the previously manual hard work for them. Namely, it translates the project as we have here. For example, this is just your everyday ArchiCAD project, including a couple of Enscape assets already, which are highlighted in orange here. Translates all of this onto the graphics card into the Enscape engine, and you see you have to select a 3D view to make that possible. So let's get back here, hit the start button, and let's see what happens. So yeah, Enscape takes all the data that is already present in your project, including, of course, geometry, but also materials, location on the planet, etc., and showcases this correctly in high quality, just like this. So let's align this on the right side of our screen and ArchiCAD on the left side. People tend to ask me how I do this. That's a Windows 10 trick. So if you're using Windows 10, by the way, you can simply press or hold the Windows key and the left or right arrow key and align a window on one half, and it will ask you which window to apply on the other half. So here we go. Yeah, that's one of the main advantages of Enscape. You don't have to export your model, you don't have to upload it to any cloud, you don't have to essentially do anything. It simply follows your directions, and not only that, it's also connected to your ArchiCAD project at all times. So if we decide to move an object, for example, let's select our light. Wait a second, can we do that? Did I select anything right now? Why does it? Let's try it this way. This is weird. Usually I can select these things. Just give me a second. You see that I'm not really an oh, now it works. So I'm not really an ArchiCAD expert. It's just enough to present Enscape, but we should get going, or we should get through this. So whatever I change in my project using my default native workflows, it will also change in. Now it's not selecting it anymore again. This is weird. So whatever I'm changing, whatever I'm doing in the project, Enscape will perform these changes immediately without you having to perform any new update or anything. By the way, I'm not sure if I have looked at this model at night already. Yeah, I thought so. These lamps do not contain lights. Of course, if you have a light source in ArchiCAD, the usual way, we can just enable our lights here, hopefully. If it opens, this is a little embarrassing. I'm very sorry for that. I'm not sure why it doesn't open the, oh yeah, probably because I'm still in this light and have that selected. No, so whatever, yeah, if I select a light source, something like this, It should show up correctly in ArchiCAD if I place it. And as you see, also emit light. So yeah, whatever you do, whatever workflows you're performing in ArchiCAD, Enscape will show these correctly, also including, of course, your light. So that can be used if you're a better trained ArchiCAD user than me. You can use this very, very nicely for live client presentations, for live project reviews with your colleagues, etc. Because again, you can confidently perform any changes and they show up correctly using your already existing knowledge. Okay, so maybe first of all, to have a slightly nicer environment to look at, the first thing I'm going to do is go into the Enscape visual settings, which you can find right here, and select a new environment, namely a horizon preset, which I can select from my atmosphere tab here. And we can select a nice backplate horizon preset right here. Horizon presets are essentially 360-degree photographs that we've removed the sky from, so you can still enjoy daytime effects and different lighting situations, as opposed to skyboxes. Skyboxes, I'm going to explain in a second what these are. But yeah, that of course gives us some nice context for our project. We might want to have the fog in this or not. A little bit of it is realistic, so let's keep it at 12% here. So yeah, this way you can get a nice context for your project easily. Now, maybe some of these environments fit your expectations. Maybe you want to see something different for your environment. You can technically create your own horizon presets like this, but it is a very tedious process to get rid of the sky in a 360-degree image. So you have to do that manually. So usually people decide not to do that. Apart from that, you can also use an actual skybox. Skybox is a 360-degree image. For Enscape, it doesn't matter what image type you're using. Any image type is being supported. So, for example, we can go to an online source, something like you could Google HDRIs. These are usually 360-degree images. You can Google skyboxes, and yeah, choose pretty much anything you find there. Let's just choose just randomly, maybe something like this for a nice sky. Or you can have, of course, an actual environment by something like HDRI Haven. You find a lot of nice 360-degree photographs here that give you some context for the scenery. So let's try this one, for example. Let's download it in 4K. And in terms of resolution, there is not really a best practice. Actually, the larger resolution you choose, the higher the strain on your graphics card, of course, but also the higher the resolution. So let's just see what this one is going to look like. We're selecting that in the same menu we were in before, in the atmosphere tab, in the visual settings, and I simply have to click this folder icon to be able to select my new skybox. And this is what we're getting. So we see, first of all, that it really doesn't fit my mood in my project. We still have the lighting coming from our sun. So the image itself emits a little bit of light. As we see here, we've just changed the daytime to night. But the project is still lit. But if we have the sun in place, we see that it's far too bright. So what can we do to adjust that? We can first of all set brightest point as sun direction. This will tell Enscape to try to estimate where the sun is located in that skybox, which is a little difficult here, as you see, but that doesn't matter. But of course, we might also want to dial down the sun brightness to have the mood in our visualization fit the one in our skybox. So maybe something like this. If you want to use your own image as skybox. The only requirement there is for Enscape images or for Enscape skyboxes is they have to have a certain aspect ratio, namely 1:2. Let me just draw it here quickly. 1:2 or 3:4 or 4:3. You don't have to write that down. If you get it wrong with an image, Enscape will bring up a notification telling you, wait a second, this doesn't have the correct resolution. By the way, it just has to be close to that resolution. You don't have to be precise, but Enscape has to get an idea to or whether this is a spherical skybox or a cubical skybox. I have a, oh no, I just cleaned up my desktop before, and of course I've probably erased one of my most important images here. So let me just get them back briefly. Give me a second here. I'm very sorry for that. Here they are. So these two. So there's two types of skyboxes around there. Skyboxes which are essentially unfolded cubes, which have a resolution like 3:4, and skyboxes which are unfolded spheres, which are usually in 1:2. So that's the only thing you have to take care of for your skyboxes to use them. And if you want to create your own ones, and that's maybe where it gets interesting for a lot of you, if you want to create your own ones, there's a couple of ways. You can use specific 360-degree cameras. I'm sorry, I might have to sneeze during my webinar. I hope you don't mind. You have 360-degree cameras, which are a little expensive and give a decent quality. You can also essentially stitch together a lot of DSLR photographs, but that is very, very tedious to do. The way I usually recommend is there's a nice app out there, the Google Street View app. If you download that to your mobile phone, it allows you to create a 360-degree photograph quite easily. There you will see some seams, so it will not stitch it together perfectly. But if you just want to go to a construction site and like capture multiple positions to that context, just quickly, that is a great way to go. I definitely recommend trying that. And if you do that, I also recommend to take it from multiple positions, from multiple perspectives, simply because I'm oftentimes being asked how to scale a skybox, and that is simply not possible because you cannot, alter the perspective of that image. You cannot look behind a building or on top of a building in a static image. So if you want to have multiple perspectives on your project, from close-ups to aerial views or something, you might want to take multiple skyboxes to be fit for any of these cases. All right, that has been a lot of time already spent on skyboxes. I hope you don't mind. But I really wanted to have this nice context there. So let's have a look at navigation in Enscape just briefly. As you see, you start with an overview down here that tells you how to navigate through Enscape. It is WASD to move forwards, backwards, and sideways. Same with the arrow keys, but usually WASD is ergonomically more convenient, especially if you have your mouse on the right side, of course. Then you can move faster by pressing Shift, or even faster by pressing Control. If you at some point happen to be spawned very far outside of your model and you want to get there quickly, there's multiple ways you can do that. You can double click anywhere on your object and Enscape will bring you there directly, or you can always jump back to the view you started from by pressing the 0 key on your numpad. That simply returns you to the view you began with. The same, you can use 4, 6, 8, and 2 to view your model from the front, left, right, and back. So you can imagine like the 5 being your project, and the 8, 4, 6, and 2 being the position of your viewer, sort of. and 5 will bring you in a top-down view. Then in fly mode, as you see up here, we're currently in fly mode. You can move up and down by using E and Q, and you can move through any obstacles. So if you want to move inside of your building or through doors or something like that, simply switch to fly mode by pressing the space bar, and then you can switch back to walk mode by pressing the space bar again, and now you have collisions, so you can no longer move through anything. All right, let's see. I'm kind of watching the audience view there a little bit, and I see that a lot of people are not watching at this time what I'm doing. So maybe I'll switch to materials at this point right away, since navigation might not be the most interesting part, or you've just listened to me that I mentioned this is being recorded and you want to watch it afterwards. I'm not sure. But anyways, if you want to have a closer look into navigation in Enscape, there's a lot that we didn't cover. Yeah, I can only recommend this this knowledge base article. Where's my chat? There's my chat, which I've posted in the chat right now. You can have a look at it in your own pace, of course. You can also control Enscape using the Xbox controller or 3D Connection Space Mouse. So yeah, let's have a look at the materials then, because I think that is what you might have been waiting for. I hope so. So right now we have this nice material here on our floor. We already see some bump mapping happening here, but I think I want to get rid of that to begin with, so we have a clean slate to start with. If somebody is not aware of what bump mapping means, I'd be very happy to explain, because in my opinion, it's the absolute key for photorealism in visualizations in general. So to adjust your materials, of course, you can go into, oh, it's been a while since I've done that, sorry for that, to element attributes, surfaces, and perform changes to that material here. And Enscape will support anything you do in the basic engine material. So you can change the shininess. I hope I have the right material here, doesn't matter. You can perform any changes you see there. Horizontal, okay. But with our new Enscape material editor that we've added, that adds the ability to, well, perform some more changes and have everything conveniently in one go. So I just want to get to be certain that I have the right material selected here by maybe tinting this quickly, and we see right away that our floor now looks green. By the way, this gives me the opportunity to showcase something very, very nice. Let me switch to a base color, and that shows one of the key attributes that makes Enscape that makes the Enscape rendering quality as outstanding as it is. You might have heard a lot in the past times about path tracing or real-time or path tracing, real-time correct lighting calculation. There's been a lot of buzz due to the new NVIDIA RTX graphics card generation that that simplifies, or that is tweaked for a real-time lighting calculation. So since Enscape has been utilizing this technique for years already, that of course just benefits our workflow. And with our latest preview that we've released, we have the first RTX prototype actually working for all RTX graphics cards. So if you want to try it, you're welcome to do so. In my case, I'm using a GTX 1080 on this machine, so you don't even see RTX working in this case yet, but it even adds us, or it adds a lot of room sort of to performance we can spend on better reflections and even better lighting and shadow calculation. Just for your information so far. And what we're seeing here is, since I've changed the floor color to a bright green, the whole room is lit nicely in green. Same would be if I switch to yellow or red. So you see that simply mimics very beautifully actual, correct lighting behavior. So let's have a look, however, at my default workflow to set up a material. Now, if you don't want to go for a base color material, that might be the case, of course. You can create something like I think it might look like a linoleum floor or something like that. If I increase the roughness, it will go more into something, I have no idea what material this might even be. But usually your materials are going to be a little more complex. And that's where textures come into place. Now, textures are image files that make up a material. You can use any type of image file. We can actually go into my pictures folder, for example, and choose any Enscape rendering or anything, and you will see that this image, I have tinted it, so let's return that to white, and that any image will work and actually give us a color for our floor. But usually the problem is that, hey, what's happened here? I wanted to untint my material, so let's do it again. So usually you will see some seams there wherever your image ends. So the key for materials or for your texture selection will probably be their ability to be tiled. How can we repeat this image without too many people noticing? And there's two approaches to do that. You can either go for the Google approach and Google something like CC0 textures. CC0 textures stands for Creative Commons 0 textures. That is a type of licensing that essentially allows you to use these images for any also commercial purposes without having to buy them in any way. And there's some very nice repositories on the web that allow you to download very nice materials. Let's have a look at, for example, tiles here, and let's maybe set up this one. And the benefit of these textures prepared for material workflows are they are tiled by default. So I can just go there, maybe download the 2K version here, and that will give us a zip file with a couple of image files. And if you're not familiar with CGI workflows, that might be a little confusing at first, but I'll be happy to explain. So we have the color texture, first of all. You can see that by the COL in it. That's simply to be used as for coloring the material, the same what we've done before with my image there. So let's select this, and again we will see the changes immediately in Enscape. And as we see, there is no visible seams because that texture is really prepared for being tiled over and over and over. So no visual seams. I think I want to scale it a little larger though, so I'll click this albedo value here and click explicit texture information and maybe put this to, this looks to me like something like 4 meters times 4 meters. Okay, let's stick with 3 times 3. All right, my computer is loading something, and I want to mention at this point once again, there's no questions yet, as I've seen, I believe. Wait a second, where is my questions field? 1 second. Oh, there it is, sorry. So there were no questions so far. If you have any questions at any point, of course, feel free. Oh, there is one, sorry. Nico, is the ambient occlusion coming to Enscape materials anytime soon? I really do like the editor itself. Thank you very much. Enscape does not use any ambient occlusion, Nico. Since Enscape uses the path tracing approach that I've mentioned before, there is no need for ambient occlusion. For anybody who is not aware of it, I'll be happy to explain. Ambient occlusion is a trick used by by traditional 3D renderers that essentially measures whenever there is two surfaces close to each other. In reality, there will be lesser light in there because the angle and because light has a hard time going into that area. Now, traditional renderers measure the distance between surfaces and can create something like, or can use something like ambient occlusion maps, which adds another or more realism to your model, to your visualization. Enscape does not need this because we actually do calculate each and every light ray 60 times a second. So Enscape is so realistic that it doesn't need or does not utilize ambient occlusion. So if you're looking for ambient occlusion effect, I'm afraid there is nothing like that is planned for the Enscape material editor, but on the upper side, you don't need it as well, or you should not. If, of course, you need it for anything, feel free to share it with us. Feel free to tell us your workflows, and we'd be happy to discuss that with our developers. If you just want to sort of attenuate your shadows, oh, by the way, I should change this to 3 at this point so I don't forget it. If you just want to attenuate your shadows, you can simply increase the sun brightness. Let's see, in the visual settings, and yeah, sun brightness, and that should also increase your shadow, well, darkness or strength. Or you can also change the contrast just for your shadows to increase your shadow attenuation. I hope this helps. If not, just again, feel free to share your insights with us. Please not during the webinar, since I have a hard time writing it down here, but you're welcome to write it to support@enscape3d.com at any point, or hit the feedback button, which you find down here, and be welcome to share your wishes with us. All right, let's return to the material editor and have a look at the material we've been creating. I think that was wood, wasn't it? Where's my material? Let me look through it. This is weird. So let's have a look at what it's called in here. There. Oh, I see. There's a typo in it. I see. I have to talk to my colleague who made this. Oh, there we are. All right. So here we have our color texture. We've applied it to the surface. And in case you only have this texture, by the way, if you have just one single image texture, you have a very nice trick in Enscape. If you want to add some detail, some surface noise to it, some depth, some believability to your rendering, and here's the big catch: bump maps. We've mentioned those before. What you want to do is add bump maps to your surface, and in the best case, they're aligning with the color. So oftentimes, maybe with the wood materials or metal, if you have a surface bump or a surface irregularity, usually it also comes with a color that is different from the rest of the surface. So if we want to have the color, the albedo being applied as bump map as well, we just have to click use albedo here, and we see we get some serious surface noise right there. Bump maps do not change anything about the surface itself. As you see, it is still perfectly flat, but it appears, or it makes the renderer act as if there is a surface irregularity there. And if you look at it, that is oftentimes really what makes for believability or photorealism in rendering, because it looks to the human eye like, oh my god, there is so much detail there that can't be handmade. It has to be, an actual photograph. So that's the trick we are all aiming for all the time. We see here that in this case, for example, it's not exactly as I would like it, because we have these parts rather extruded instead of, or as a part to intruded or protruded. So we can simply dial down the amount of the bump map. I would have done this anyways. We can dial it down to negative, and that way we'll have the the gaps between our tiles here look more correctly. That is one of the important parts for a believable material. So we have color, we have bump, which means surface irregularity in terms of geometry, and then we have our reflectivity here. You see, it's nicely reflecting our sun and our light. And if we want to have some irregularity in that as well, such as every material in reality has, we can also click use albedo for this, and that way we will have some nice. Did it do that yet? I'm not sure. So we're currently applying it to our roughness. There it is. So and since we have now different brightness values for our roughness, we will have we have more reflective and less reflective parts, which also makes for a believable surface. So that is the approach if you only have one texture. However, we have downloaded the whole package here from cc0textures.com. We have one displacement map, which can be very well used as a bump map. Displacement is usually a technique used by still image renderers. It actually deforms the surface instead of just acting like it, so it's not usable for real time. But nonetheless, we can use that very conveniently for our bump map as well. Just make sure you have the same explicit texture transformation as before, so it's matching our color. And what does that look like? All right, we see we have a way stronger result this time. It's still inverted, so we still want to adjust the strength. All right, that's too much. Oftentimes, especially for bump maps, just a hint of an effect is really enough, because what you want to do, or what you want to achieve, is this very subtle irregularity in that reflection. It's jumping back to my previous value, didn't want that, so here we go. And also, if you have less roughness, so more reflectivity, that also always adds some nice, flashy effect to it. All right, let's have a look at the other textures we've downloaded there. We've also downloaded normal maps, which is another type of bump map. Briefly said, Enscape can utilize normal maps in any CAD softwares, whether you're using ArchiCAD or Revit or SketchUp or Rhino. Simply feed a normal map value into the bump input, and it will display it correctly right away. So yeah, I hope that was, or let's see, we actually also have a metal map here, which we don't have a metallic input texture in Enscape. We just have the slider here, so let's ignore that. And we have a roughness input that, as we see here, fits our roughness value perfectly. So let's choose that for the for that roughness input, and the result of our material very nicely, as we see it here, we have that beautiful roughness irregularity map there, and that really makes for a believable outcome, a believable material, which will make your renderings look amazing. Oh, there is another question from Nico. It looks like it might take a while to read, so let me do it right away. The bump map seems to work very well in this texture. However, I seem to have some struggles with the bump map editor using some of my own textures. I used the albedo map for the bump editor. If I do not have the bump map texture for the albedo, the effect of the bump isn't showing any ideas why these kind of problems may occur. The only case why a bump map might not be showing, if you're not using a normal map, as in this case, we have a slider. So I'll just do the same. Please check if you have your values somewhere close to 0, because that would be my idea for why the effect is not showing for you. If that's not the solution, let me just dial it back up. As soon as we change the value, we clearly see the outcome here. If that is not the case for you, if you have the value somewhere higher and it's still not showing up, of course we'll be happy to help you. Just write us a message or via the feedback button onto I'm just realizing that with the current version, with the current preview that I'm using here, it seems to jump back to the previously selected value quite often from the Enscape material editor. So have an eye open for that. Maybe that might be the reason. But in any case, if that's not the solution, please feel free to write us a message using the feedback button. We'd be happy to investigate that together with you. All right, let's have a look then on exports. So if you want to then showcase your beautiful materials you've developed and create a nice rendering, all you have to do actually is to hit this button here. Let me mark that for you, since it took some time for me to find it after all. There. Before we do that, however, I want to adjust my sun angle a little bit. And here's a nice little tip for you. You can change the sun angle using U and I, by the way, not just using Shift and right mouse button and mouse movement. And if you use Shift and U or I, or Control and U or I, you can break the sun's natural trajectory. So if you want to position your sun somewhere different than what is used by default, try playing with Shift and Control plus U and I, or Shift or Control plus U and I, and you will be able to find the perfect position for your sun to light your project. Because that is also one of the main tips I can give you for creating beautiful renderings. Be mindful of your lighting. If you have natural light in your scene, take care of it playing its role. Either some architects prefer architectural renderings with the light behind their project, so you have some even lighting throughout. Oftentimes having some drastic lighting from the side or having it shining from the front like this will create nice shadows and contrasts, and that can help highlight specific parts of your project. So if I want to create a rendering, first of all, I have to do is to click the before mentioned create or render image button. All that is necessary. Enscape will then ask me where to save the image. I choose desktop, hit save, and Enscape will create the rendering for me right away, immediately. This is what it looks like. Here's our high quality rendering right away. If we want to perform some changes to the settings regarding this, we will find it again in the visual settings capture tab. Here you can choose a resolution for your rendering. So for this case, let's switch to Ultra HD 4K. We can also enable show save frame, which is useful, especially if we have our Enscape window in an unusual size like this. And if we want to post-process the image without having to redo the rendering, we can also export an object ID, material ID, and depth channel. I'll show in a second what this means, but the depth channel shows on a scale from white to black how far is something away from the camera. Now this can be useful if you want to apply depth related effects afterwards in Photoshop, but we have these by default in Enscape already. So you can apply some depth of field as well, which I would recommend anyways, because that adds this beautiful DSLR camera effect to it, and you can direct the viewer's focus very, very detailed. So that again adds a lot of believability to the rendering. So I think rather than the depth channel, what is more useful oftentimes is an alpha channel. An alpha channel will essentially give you a black and white map where white is your project and black is all the background. So that way you can easily create another map in Photoshop, for example, to feed in any background you want to. Might be a photograph, might be a solid color or whatever. So that's just a nice tip that is often being referred to. So by dialing this value up to 10,000 meters, I achieve an alpha channel and can post-process my image this way very conveniently as well. So let's create the rendering once again, and I've clicked show save frame, so it will now show me exactly the aspect ratio we'll be achieving with the rendering beforehand, so I can still fine-tune it. And let's hit render image again and save it to our desktop. And this time with a 4K rendering, this is how long Enscape will take for it. See? And by the way, we're already in our Q&A time slot, so I'll just continue showing you how to perform exports. But if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them. Oh, here we are. So here's our 4K rendering, way more highly resolved than before. But we also have a material ID channel that lets me create a mask from separate materials to change their brightness, change their color, whatever in Photoshop afterwards. Same with an object ID channel, so we don't have to select all the materials of an object. And our alpha channel, which we can use to bring some backgrounds into the environment very easily. Is it possible to use the align view camera from ArchiCAD on Enscape? Yes, you can. Sorry, I've skipped a little bit of my initial how to navigate in Enscape part. So the button for that is this one here. So all you have to do is push this button, and Enscape will then know to follow your ArchiCAD camera. So if you're I assume you're familiar with navigation in ArchiCAD. If you don't want to get into how to navigate in Enscape at all, simply push this button and you can continue navigating in Enscape by simply controlling ArchiCAD like you used to. It's not the most convenient for me, as you might see, but yeah, that is perfectly possible. I hope that was your question. If not, of course, please feel free to elaborate. All right, so that was how to create a still image rendering. Let's try creating a panorama. So to create a 360-degree panorama from within Enscape, there's two types of panoramas and two types of buttons you can use. The first one is a mono panorama, so it will simply create a 360-degree rendering that is great to be viewed on well, any device that has a monitor, frankly, on your computer, on a mobile phone, on a tablet, whatever. The second button, which is now grayed out, is distinctively for Google Cardboard or comparable services. So Google Cardboard is a mobile phone-based virtual reality that. Oh, I noticed that I haven't mentioned virtual reality at all yet. I think I'm still going to do that, by the way. I have it here. So it's a mobile phone-based virtual reality, and this button will essentially create two panoramas as far away as the human eye from each other, and will therefore allow you to perceive depth and dimensions whenever viewed in a Google Cardboard device. So in this case, I've created a mono panorama. Now, it seems to have vanished. We have no idea where it went. Well, we can manage it in the Manage Uploads interface right under it. Let me mark it again because that didn't work out too well. This one. Yeah, the naming is a little odd, but here you will find your panoramas because you can also upload them to our cloud. You can export them as image file if you want to, but you can upload them to our cloud like this. You will receive a QR code right here. You can save that QR code. You can print it out. You can send it to somebody. You can scan it with your mobile phone to view it on your mobile phone right away. Or you just click this button here, and Enscape will open the panorama in your browser to be viewed right away and share it with anybody. Just as I'm just going to share it with you in the chat, so you can look it up yourself. By the way, this is a medium resolution panorama. Again, if we want to change that, Capture tab, panorama resolution down here. Okay, let's see. Do we have enough time to have a look at how to create a video? 10 minutes. Yeah, that's actually enough time. Actually, we still have time to have a look at virtual reality as well. If you're not aware of that, Enscape does support computer-based virtual reality just as well, and it is the simplest solution to do so. So right now, I have to remember you, we're actually just one click deep into Enscape. We just clicked one button, and Enscape has created all of this pretty much by its own, except for the material. Yes, you're right. Now to get into this virtual reality headset, to view this actually as if we're in the scene, there's just one more button click necessary, and it's right this one, enable VR headset. So if we do that, we can simply put this on right away, and you will see, hopefully, let's see. No, I misclicked. There we are. So, and what we are seeing is that it is tracking my my head movement right away, and I'm actually in the scene. I can look around, and it looks real. So we have our controllers here available. We have some settings available, like white mode, for example, to see it without any materials applied or without the color part of the materials. You see, we still have our nice bump map here. We can change, we can add some outlines for some cartoonish look. We can change the daytime, but I like the one before. We can perform renderings, or we can plan renderings from within this using this nice sort of snapshot tool here. We can access our map, which is, by the way, also accessible in non-VR mode. And we can access or locations if we have any. Yeah, but maybe most importantly, it still follows our changes in ArchiCAD. So you can actually have a client in VR exploring your model, and if they ask you to do so, we can perform any changes and they will pop up in front of their eyes, which, as you can imagine, is a sometimes breathtaking experience, actually. So let's disable VR, and we now see it will now render the image that we've planned before. Yeah, it looks a little smudged right now, but it'll make it right away. There we are. So because, of course, during VR, it will savor the graphics card power for the virtual reality experience. It will then perform the renderings after virtual reality has been disabled. All right, let's actually leave these outlines on. I like how it looks in this case. How to create a video. Let's press. So if I bring my my controls chart back up here, we see that video editor is connected to the key letter or K letter or K key. So by pressing K, this will bring me into the video editor, and we see that our interface has changed a little bit. But all I have to do is now to press K again, and that will place my first keyframe. A keyframe is a point in time and space, sort of, that tells the renderer, be here at time whatever. We'll have a look into that in a second. We can click this camera symbol to see what the camera is going to see. We can, of course, fine-tune it by hitting apply. Then we can also key a few attributes we see down here. For example, time of day. We'll get to that. But first of all, I can now fly through my model, press K from time to time, and this way just block out a camera path very, very nicely. If you've seen our Enscape 2.6 release video, you might notice, you might recognize this scene and the kind of video I'm creating here. Yes, that's exactly the one where we've had these beautiful material changes in. I hope you've enjoyed it. And already, by simply placing a couple of these cameras here, I can press P, and preview what my video is going to look like. I think that's nice. Again, for me, this runs fluently, so it looks very, very pleasing. However, maybe I'll move a little to the side here again. I'm not sure why I was moving to the side this way. And again, this way you can very easily perform changes to it. We might want to change the speed of our video from one point to the other. We can do that by keying the timestamp value down here. That is actually really, really useful because, or also very simple, because this value actually tells Enscape reach this keyframe at second whatever we've selected here. So right now it's going to reach this keyframe at second 6. Then we might want to slow down or something and reach this keyframe maybe at second 30. By the way, we're also often getting asked how to preview a video not from the beginning. Simply press P in one of these keyframes that you've set, and the preview will start from there. We also see now that the speed has gone down, so I think that is beneficial. The viewer can, take their time to appreciate your design. But I've also mentioned I wanted to add some time lapse, so I'm just going to change the time of day value for this keyframe here, click apply, then go to the last one and select a different time of day. I wanted to play some nice role here, so I want to stick with this one. Hit apply, and now if we preview it, we see that the sun angle changes, the clouds are also wandering across the sky, and all of it makes for a very believable, except for the outlines, obviously, but I actually like the style for this time. Very, very believable outcome. So yeah, I think I'm fine with that. I'll go to the visual settings again, capture tab, and switch back to full HD. I think that is sufficient this time. Maximum compression quality, definitely recommended, 30 frames per second. And if anybody has ever rendered a video from CGI before, if not Enscape, brace yourselves, because Enscape can render a video with an incredible speed. We now have 30 seconds with each 30 frames, and you see by the progress bar that we might even be finished during this webinar that is still supposed to last for 3 minutes. So that is a very, very simple and quick way to create a beautiful video. Now, I didn't get to talk about our standalone exports. Yes, you can also brand your Enscape experience with your own custom loading screen, with your own interface overlay, with your own icon, and then export an exe file that is an actual copy of Enscape, has the same features, the same VR capabilities, is just no longer connected to ArchiCAD, so you can no longer change anything about it, but you can send it to anybody who has a machine that meets our system requirements, and they'll be able to run it without any additional license or anything. Or you can also actually execute or create a web standalone, which you upload to our servers, and you can then run it right in your browser or whoever. Both of these are also just one click, as most things Enscape. You find these here, exe and web. We also didn't mention the asset library that you can use to, well, fit your scene with beautiful models, interior objects, cars, people, etc. But again, as I mentioned initially, you are welcome to schedule a web session with us. Enscape3d.com, down here, the pop-up, and we'd be happy to dive with you together deeper into how to create beautiful and simple visualizations using Enscape. I hope you've enjoyed our webinar. I'll leave this open for a couple more minutes. Have you planned a Mac OS version? This question is being asked quite a lot. Let's see. The problem why we are not supporting Mac OS so far is simply because Apple is not building strong graphics cards into most of their hardware. So far it was simply not feasible for us in any way, because most of Apple hardware is using Intel graphics cards, and Enscape does not run on Intel graphics cards. However, if at some point maybe Intel manages to run OpenGL 4.3 complex graphics applications, maybe it will then be feasible for us, or good for us to support Mac OS. At this point, although it's being requested a lot, there's simply no way to display this quality on a Mac OS usually. So if you have a powerful Mac machine, you can use Boot Camp to run Windows on it and use Enscape this way. But apart from that, thank you for that feedback, but I'm afraid there is nothing in the short term I could promise. Support for ArchiCAD 23, however, is coming as soon as possible. Yes, of course. If there's any further questions, I will wait for this video to be finished so I can show you the final result. I'll then close down the video transmission, but I'll be still a little bit available here. If you've got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them via chat, of course. So our video is done. Here's our result. Again, for me, this is buttery smooth, so it looks very, very nice, and it should do the same for you. So feel free to try it right away if you haven't yet, and achieve great results. And if we can help you with anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you for this time, and yeah, see you next time, or in our forums maybe. Goodbye.